Monica!
Hello.
I am really excited to have you on the podcast today.
I'm very honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so you and I, we should let the listeners in. You and I have known each other for probably about 5-6 years now.
Yeah, it's, I think almost like 6 years exactly. It was August 6 years ago.
Yeah, because I needed a Saturday morning yoga teacher at my yoga studio. It was my one day off a week, and I needed somebody who was good and dependable and just the right fit, and it was you.
Yeah, it was a really nice, kind of serendipitous connection. I had just moved to North Carolina. I didn't know anybody. I wasn't really fitting in with a lot of people at my job, and I was hanging out at the local Lululemon store trying to meet other people who enjoyed yoga. And they said, hey, you really need to meet Alicia. She has a great studio, and maybe you two would hit it off. And I just remember the first time we talked, I was like, we totally hit it off.
Yeah,
it was great.
It was awesome. Okay, I'm going to take your hair and just... can you tell the listeners a little bit about your career background?
Sure. So I guess to kind of get into that, I have to go way back. So my mom always said when I was really little, when I was a little kid, I had to touch everything and I had to feel everything, and especially fabric, I was really drawn to. Also a little embarrassing, but listeners of a certain age will remember maybe wearing Jinko jeans and going to raves and dance parties. I started making myself pants to wear to raves back in the late 90s. And I got more and more interested in textiles, in fashion, and apparel. So I went to school for textile and apparel design. And for the last 12 years, I have been working in the apparel industry as a technical designer. So that does not have anything to do with computers.
What does that mean?
Yeah, most people are like, oh, sweet, I love computers. I'm like, that's not what that does. So it's basically like your architect has the engineer, your designer has the technical designer. So your designer is going to have all the ideas. They hand their ideas to me. I work with a factory to help them, give them measurements to make a pattern. I fit garments. I check it on all different sizes. We fit it on live models, and we're basically the last step before something goes into production. So I've been pretty fortunate. I've worked for some pretty large companies that I'm sure everyone has something in their closet from some of those companies. But yeah, it's been 12 years of a lot of corporate jobs, and it's been a little intense. The apparel industry is it's not Project Runway. If you like Project Runway, please don't go into the apparel industry. It's not the same. It's very intense. It's very high pressure. There can be a lot of ego involved, and everyone always likes to say something didn't sell because it didn't fit, which can be true, but also some things just might not resonate with your customers. And when you're constantly under the gun and saying, why did you do this? Why did you do this? Why did you do this? It gets a little draining.
Absolutely. And so is that what got you into yoga? So how did you find yoga in all of that?
Yeah. So actually that's pretty interesting too. So I had been out of school working in the industry for about 2 years, and I had my long-term boyfriend in college, and I broke up because he wanted to get married and I didn't. It just, he was a great guy, but we weren't the right fit for each other. And then I found out that he was engaged to someone that he met while we were dating, and they were engaged like 6 months after we broke up. So that was a huge blow to my self-esteem. I took it really hard, and I had a pretty wild New Year's Eve with a friend and her husband, and I woke up the next day feeling kind of tired, kind of run down, and I turned on the TV, and there was a Rodney Yee yoga special on PBS. And I started watching it, and I started doing the breathing exercises, and I was like, holy shit, I feel really good.
Yeah.
I feel calm. I was able to just kind of drop in and settle and relax.
Mm-hmm.
And with that behind me, I actually found a yoga basics class, and I was living in Milwaukee at the time. Shout out Midwest. I found a yoga basics class that was a 4-week series that just, I mean, I was afraid to even go into a studio. I was like, everyone's gonna look at me, they're gonna know I don't know what I'm doing. Which, if you have not done yoga and you think that's how a yoga studio is, everyone's gonna be so welcoming, and people will make sure you're comfortable. So don't let that hold you back. So I went to this 4-week series and I loved it so much. I did it a second time and I got my mom to come with me. And then I just started going to yoga at least once a week. And it was my time for me. And it was actually really cool because everyone at work was like, what are you doing differently? Like, you seem a lot more calm. You're not like seeming very upset. I was like, it's all the yoga. So I was practicing regularly for about 2 years, and then I decided to do a teacher training. And it's just, I've been teaching yoga since. That was 8 years ago.
Yeah. And, I haven't really actually talked about this on the podcast yet, but since you and I have such an intense yoga background, for me, my 200-hour program, which is really like just a foundational program for yoga teachers, almost like the bare minimum certification requirement, it was life-changingly profound.
It was really, it made a huge, huge difference in my life, and it gave me a lot of tools to cope with everyday life that I had them somewhere in myself. I just didn't know how to access them. Right. It's like turning the key in the lock. Like, you have it. What pocket is it in? Yeah. Once you find it and you turn that key, it literally and figuratively opens a lot of doors for you.
Absolutely. And it's funny because, I'm not a quote-unquote certified life coach because, I've done thousands of hours of yoga and of yoga CE requirements and things like that, and I feel like what they're teaching in those preliminary coaching certifications, I learned that in yoga.
There's so much overlap.
Yeah, so much. And so I for me, that feels like my coaching foundation is that showing people the basics of turning inward. And
and once you can find that, and turning inward is not easy. It's a challenge. You have to confront a lot of things that you might not want to confront. But that's a lot of the beauty of it, is that once you can look at those things and really learn to look at them without judgment, I think that's a lot of the key, especially in today's society. There's so much judgment placed on everything. Once you can really start examining things and say, this is how something is, it's neither good nor bad. Why is that? Why am I feeling this way? Why do I have that reaction? Take out the good, bad judgment aspect of it, and it's truly life-changing.
Transformational.
Absolutely.
So that kind of leads me to something else, that you were just talking about the self, how hard it can be to turn inward.
Yes.
And part of the reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast is because you just got back from your radical sabbatical.
I did, yes.
And I am so fascinated with your journey, to be really honest.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's as an outsider watching you just bloom has been a really a privilege to get to watch your journey.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you for putting it all out there for all of us. I had a bit of a radical sabbatical myself. The first year I went in business for myself, doing, the year of the travel, going one place each month. And I really think embodied experiences are critically important in personal development and leadership development, in figuring out what it is that you want to do with your life.
I'm getting goosebumps. Yes.
Yeah. And, you came over a couple weeks ago to tell me about your time in Italy, and you were telling me that it was hard in the beginning. Can you share with folks what you did and why you did it, and then we'll back up and answer that question?
Absolutely. So I recently asked for 2 months of unpaid time off from my job, which was probably one of the scariest things I ever did, because I had already booked my trip. Like, it was done, it was paid for, it was booked. I then asked for time off, knowing if they said no, I just wasn't going to go back to that job. So that was really challenging for me, just to know that I might not have that security blanket to fall back on. Luckily, they said yes. They were very understanding eventually. So I had, it goes back a little ways. I had a really, really good friend of mine actually pass away. And it was really eye-opening for me. We had known each other since we were 9 years old. He was my first boyfriend. He had been someone who was very, very important to me, and he passed away very unexpectedly. And it really shook me to the point where I was like, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
I go to this, and I don't want to in any way make it look like I'm looking down on people who have an office job or have a 9 to 5. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just his death really kind of opened my eyes to the fact that it's such a cliche, you hear it all the time, tomorrow isn't promised. Tomorrow is not promised. I hadn't really been doing a lot of travel for myself. I hadn't really traveled internationally since my brother's wedding in Malaysia, and that was 10 years previous. So then I started to think about what kinds of things do I do for myself on a regular basis that make me feel good and that make me happy. And the list was really short.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I want listeners to like write that down, like make a list of what you do on a regular basis for yourself that makes you feel happy.
Right. And seriously, sometimes it was as simple as I turn off my phone and I go to bed early, or I'm going to get up and take a walk before work, or I'm going to call a friend, and if she doesn't answer, I'm going to make sure that we really do reconnect and take the time to talk. And a lot of it was about reconnecting with people. But yeah, the list was pretty short, and that made me really kind of stop and think, so what exactly am I doing? And it led me to the realization that I am moving through life in a very unconscious way. I was totally on autopilot. And that didn't sit well with me because, I'm teaching yoga, I regularly practice yoga, I practice meditation. I want to lead a conscious life. And here I am just in autopilot like a zombie. I teach my class, I go to work, I'm at work for 9-10 hours a day, and then I literally come home and I sit on the couch and stare at my phone and then go to bed. That to me was not an existence I wanted to continue with. So I started thinking about what things did I do in the past that made me happy. And one of those things was travel, and another one was speak Italian. So I took Italian in college. I stayed in college for a really long time. Like, if anyone's listening and they're in college, just don't leave. Just stay. I was running out of classes to take to be a full-time student, and foreign language classes were 4 credit hours, so
Wow.
Sign me up. And it was such a nice change from apparel. In an apparel program, you have to produce a garment. That doesn't suck. Most of the time, right, they kind of suck, just because of the time constraints. So it was really nice to go to a class where I'm like, I'm making note cards. I'm learning to speak a language. I don't have to physically produce something. That was a really nice change. And I was able to study abroad for a summer. I spent the summer of 2006 in Perugia, in Umbria, in Italy. But then once I finished school at FIT, I got a full-time job. That just totally fell by the wayside. So last summer, I was like, I need to start speaking Italian again. And surprisingly, I remembered a lot more than I thought I would. I started doing Skype lessons with a woman from Florence, Ciao Beatrice, if you're listening. And I also signed up for a language exchange website. I met some really wonderful friends that still help me with my Italian. I help them with their English. It's a really great way to meet people from different cultures and practice language. Another one of the things that I hadn't really been doing was sewing garments for myself.
And you love to sew.
I love to sew, yes. But going to work all day and looking at garments for other people and looking at patterns all day and fitting a body that wasn't my body, I didn't really want to come home. I had been doing a lot of quilting, and I had all my friends were having kids. I was making tons of baby stuff, which if you're learning to sew, baby things are great because they're small, and if you make a mistake, you just cut a new piece. There's not the financial investment of, I spent $60 on this fabric that I have to cut and make it perfect.
And make it perfect, yeah.
So I have been very inspired. There's an amazing home sewist community on Instagram and just blog network. And every year there is, I hate to use the term challenge just because I feel like it breeds some competition. It's very friendly, but there's a big challenge that's called Me Made May. So the whole concept of Me Made May is you wear things that you've made for yourself in May. And some people set the challenge of, I'm gonna wear one Me Made outfit in May. Some people say, I'm gonna wear a Me Made garment every day. You take it to your own level.
Right.
I've always been a bit of a lurker on Me Made May. I watch what everyone else is doing, but I never participated. And so I kind of got this crazy idea of, I'm gonna do Me Made May from Italy. So that was kind of how the idea got started. I'll be able to make myself some garments that I love. I'll make it a capsule wardrobe. I'll take this 2-week trip. It's going to be amazing. I'll speak Italian. I'll get to travel. And then I had a really good relative of mine passed away. So my great uncle passed away. He was 98, and his favorite vacation destination was always Italy. And so in his honor, and just thinking really big, getting out of my box, and again, knowing tomorrow's not promised, 2 weeks turned into 2 months. So I was like, I'm just gonna go for it. And I booked the first 2 weeks through a travel agent. Christy Soper's been on the show before.
Yeah,
so
she's amazing.
Concierge, if you're looking for an amazing partner to help you plan an amazing vacation, highly, highly recommend them. So I got the first 2 weeks planned, and then for the rest of the trip, I decided I really wanted to be in one place where I could immerse myself in an artist culture. And so for me, that city was Florence. Florence is well known for art. It's the city of the Renaissance. And then so I spent 2 weeks traveling through southern Italy, and then I spent 5 weeks living in Florence. And it was an amazing experience.
Wow.
But yeah, it wasn't all, I think I put this on an Instagram post, like, it's not all pasta and cocktails. It wasn't. There was a lot of pasta and there were a lot of cocktails. But when you travel by yourself, and especially when you're in a place where I spoke the language, but when you're alone too, there's some people are a little cautious to approach you. And there were times where I was like, why did I do this? This is the first time I've truly been alone and on my own in years. My phone also wasn't working that great, so like I couldn't even, pick up my phone and text someone.
Right.
I didn't have the comfort of being able to scroll through Instagram.
I know, how often do we just numb out by scrolling, right?
Yeah, it's still part of my life. I'm trying to tone it down, but awareness is half the battle.
Yep.
But yeah, especially the first 2 weeks, it was really hard. Some of it was just being out of my routine and being out of my comfort zone, which showed me that, again, I had been on autopilot for so long, and that I really hadn't done anything to push myself in any kind of way, and not just creatively, but just getting out, doing something different, that's not teaching yoga and then going to my desk job and trying not to scream every day.
Yeah.
So it really showed me that I had been very comfortable for way too long, and I had really just been drifting, and I had really lost a lot of that focus of what am I truly living for. Another part that traveling alone brings up, you're alone with your thoughts a lot.
So what are you thinking about?
And sometimes that's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I was really forced to look at a lot of things that I hadn't wanted to examine. And truly, y'all, get a good therapist.
Yes.
So helpful. I actually reached out to a therapist while I was on my trip.
Wow.
And it has been so helpful. One, just to take away the judgment of there is no good or bad behind why you're feeling a certain way. But for someone with professional training and an outside perspective to help you break down the why and give you the tools to move beyond is incredible.
Tremendous, right?
Yeah. So find yourself a good therapist. There are tons of options today. So yeah, especially the first 2 weeks, and then when I first got to Florence, it was pretty intimidating. I mean, I was afraid to go to the market and buy groceries.
Why? Like, what made that so intimidating that you were like, okay, I'm like scared to do this?
I honestly think I had been so closed up in a shell before I went on this trip. I was so comfortable in my routine that I was so far beyond my routine. First of all, I was afraid anyone I had spoken Italian to on my trip just answered me in English. And so I was like, my Italian's terrible, which it's not. Everyone they think they're being helpful by answering. Right. Most Americans don't speak Italian. Don't get me wrong though, Italian grandpas love me.
Oh, I bet they do.
They're like, oh, you speak Italian. I was like, goodbye. No offense, Italian grandpas. But yeah, I had built up so much anxiety and so much nervousness just being outside of my comfort zone. And once you get past that and you're like, I just don't give a shit. I need to go out and just see what happens and talk to people. I'm gonna go to the market, and so what if I can't say albicoque correctly? I'm gonna try. And once I was able to break past that and just get out and really, some of it is just, a big fear of being wrong. And a lot of that goes back to how my job has been for the last 12 years. There isn't room to be wrong. There just isn't, especially when you're working for a very large company where there's a lot of money on the line. If you're wrong, you learn really quickly to not be wrong. And we put so much pressure on ourselves from that. So being able to...
How can you grow if you can't be wrong sometimes?
Exactly. It's, there's so much learning that happens, and that was really a huge part of this trip for me was seeing that when I am wrong, it's a growth opportunity. And I feel like that's a perspective shift, especially in this country, that everyone could really embrace, especially in a business standpoint.
Yeah.
I know there's money on the line and things, but we can tone it down a little bit.
Well, like my current mantra around that is like I've got a lot going on in my life, and I'm not. And my mantra to myself is I'm not going through something. I'm growing through something.
I love that.
I
love that.
And it sounds to me like you made it a point to take this leap where you could grow.
Yes, and that. It was so hard, but it was so wonderful. And so I met so many amazing people. Once I got to Florence, I really wanted to immerse myself and just give myself the chance to do a ton of art and do something that maybe wasn't sewing, and that didn't matter what the outcome was. So I signed up for a week-long drawing class. It was hard. I mean, we were drawing from 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. And
that is so much drawing.
Yeah, that is a lot of drawing. And there was one day where I was like, I have to go. And my teacher was like, what's going on? I was like, I'm done. Goodbye. This is my class. I'm paying for my experience, and I'm done for the day.
Done.
He put out something for me to draw that I was like, I don't want to draw that. And that so much resistance. And it was funny because I came back, I went out that night, I walked around, had a cocktail, came back to class the next day, and I finished my drawing no problem. And so also learning that it's okay when there are times to walk away from something.
Yes, absolutely.
And give yourself a distraction that's perhaps a healthier distraction than scrolling through Instagram, or numbing out with eating a bunch of food mindlessly. Maybe it means taking a walk. Getting out in a beautiful city somewhere, and then you can come back and finish what you need to finish.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
That was good learning, but man, I did not want to. We had to draw a skull from a medical skeleton. I just did not. That drawing went in the trash.
I've always wanted to do that, actually.
Draw a skull or take a no. Oh, well, you go for it.
That's the macabre in me,
It was just something I was like, I just don't want to draw this. I do not. I wanted life drawing. I wanted live models. But yeah, by the end of the week, I was feeling really good about my drawing. It was something I had used to do that I really kind of put by the wayside. And then I also signed up. I took a watercolor painting class. I love painting, but I've always been really, really terrible at it. And the beautiful thing for me about painting is that it's kind of an escape in that, especially if you do watercolor, I know you've done watercolors, it's really hard.
It's really hard.
And learning, you have to learn to be minimal, and I want to put in all the detail. So I developed this little watercolor drawing and painting practice where every day, once my drawing class itself was over, I would wake up in the morning, I would do my yoga, a little bit of meditation, I would make my coffee, I opened my windows, I would hear the bells of the Duomo ringing in Florence.
Wow.
And I would just sit with my sketchbook, and some days I would just paint squares in watercolor and see if I could get edges that were straight and not blurry. And just, I would just do it until I got tired, and then I would look at the clock and be like, oh, okay, I can get up and go on with my day. And that's something that I have brought back with me now that I'm back at my day job. I bring my watercolors to work, and I sit outside some days at lunch, especially the mornings I teach yoga. I don't have the time in the morning before work, but really making sure it's so important to do something that's creative that you can kind of get lost in every day. And especially if you can find something that you're not tied to the outcome. For me with sewing, I'm still very tied to the outcome. I want a really polished, professional-looking garment. I spent a lot of money on fabric. I want it to look good.
Yes.
But having this painting and drawing, and if I make a drawing that doesn't look great, I just make a new one.
Yeah, so, in my coaching, I think creativity is everything. So I've realized that for me, it's like, I'm a leadership coach, I'm a career coach, I'm that person that will help you take your life to the next level. But the tools that I employ are creativity and positive psychology, right? And so I'm really fascinated with this interplay of creativity in life. And I'm always curious, especially for someone like you, what does creativity mean to you?
Oh, that's a really great question. I think creativity means giving yourself permission to try. You're creating something. For me, it's usually something that's visual or something that's tactile, but you're giving yourself permission to try. You're taking out this is watercolor and I can only do this with it.
Yes.
Or this is sewing and I can only do this. The creative aspect for me is, this is watercolor, here are the rules. How can I break all the rules? And what can I try? So really giving yourself permission to just go for it. And I know so many people, like my mom will say this a lot. She's like, I'm just not creative like you. And I'm like, everyone's creative. You just haven't found the way in which it works for you to express it. For some people, I have two very lovely friends in New York, and they are crazy plant ladies.
I love crazy plant ladies. I'm an aspiring crazy plant lady.
I am not. I kill every plant I have ever had. But for them, creativity might be, I'm going to spend 20 minutes repotting a plant.
Right.
And it becomes that process, and you give yourself permission to just really immerse yourself in it. And then, they have these beautiful homes that are just filled with plants, and going to them is it's like a sanctuary. It's a little oasis. But I feel like if people can really play around with what is it for you that you can immerse yourself in, get out something from inside of you, but not be attached to the outcome. I have a friend, for her, it's writing, and she's journaling every day, and maybe it turns into something, but maybe it doesn't. I have other friends who are musicians. I always wanted to be a musician, but it's just not musician and plant lady is not for me. That's never, it's just not for me.
It's good to know what you can rule out, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like, what's the worst thing that happens if you try it? I tried to play bass in a band. It didn't work for me. So you know what? I made clothes for the people in the band.
That's
and
great.
That was a great way to be involved. And I go to concerts and I appreciate people's music, but it's not for me to make the music.
Yeah.
So
So Monica, what would you tell people about travel? Like, what do you think about travel? I know before we started, you were like, this isn't about me telling other people to do things.
Right.
So I'm kind of asking you to break your own rule here. But like,
Okay,
what
okay.
what do you think people will get out of a travel experience, and why should they go do it?
I think the first thing is really breaking out of your routine. So many of us get stuck. I mean, and if you think about, it's an analogy too that's used a lot in yoga and talking about movement patterns within your body. If you think about a lawn and you walk back and forth in the same place, it wears down a path. Well, sometimes it's good to get off that path. And we want multiple paths to take. So getting out of your routine, changing your scenery, it's really eye-opening. You start to see things that you never have seen before, or you see things, everyday things in a different way.
Right.
That is huge. Getting to experience new cultures, obviously, is amazing. But I think the biggest takeaway for me of this trip, other than breaking out of my rut, was all the inspirational people that I met, getting to talk to people, getting to hear their stories, and really seeing how we all have so much more in common
Yes.
than the things that we let divide us.
Yes.
I met so many wonderful people from so many different backgrounds and was really able to just kind of understand where they were coming from, why they were traveling, or maybe they were Italians and they weren't traveling, and getting to take a little bit of that perspective and apply that to my own life
Mm-hmm.
was really, really huge. So I was just really honored to meet so many incredible people, and we've all stayed in touch, which is the great part about technology today.
Yeah.
I'm not
We're
trying
so
to send
lucky
someone
in
a
that
letter.
way. Yeah.
I can send them a message online, or something on WhatsApp, and they get it immediately. But really trying to make those connections.
Mm-hmm.
And I also feel like, especially for me in my day-to-day job, I work with a lot of people that I might feel like I don't have a ton in common with.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't spend a lot of time together necessarily outside of work. So getting to meet so many cool people and really forge some new connections,
Yes.
it just kind of opened something in me that I think was really, it had been missing for a while.
I completely understand that. And, I wish big travel trips were accessible to everyone. I mean, if there were a way to make travel to international travel a requirement and a possibility for every single person in this world, I would make that happen like that, right? I mean, because I think that there is so much power in learning that the way we do things, or the way we've done things in our family or in our house, isn't the way it's done everywhere. And like being able to expand and broaden your horizon in that way and make new friends and is really amazing. But I don't think that international travel is the only way to do that, right? I mean,
Definitely not.
even like pitching a tent in your own city in a like park somewhere that has camping can feel like an experience of getting out of the country sometimes, right?
Definitely. Or just looking for somewhere that might be, if you have access to a car, maybe plan a weekend with a friend and drive somewhere that's 2 or 3 hours a day.
Yes.
Even just making some kind of a switch, any kind of a switch to get you out of your routine. And I especially feel like in the corporate world, I mean, let's be real, and most jobs here in this, and explaining this to Italians, they were like, no wonder you guys are crazy. Like, most people have 10 days of vacation.
Right.
If you're lucky, you might get 15
Right.
days. That's not a lot of time, especially if you consider we're both in a situation where our families all live further away. Anytime, most all of my vacation involves going home to see my family,
Right.
which is incredibly important. But maybe find something, could you get out of your routine for just maybe 3 days?
Yeah.
A little longer than a weekend. Like, really give yourself a full break. Don't be afraid to turn off your phone.
Yeah, that digital detox aspect of it is
Yeah.
insanely important.
It was amazing. I did not watch, I watched the last Game of Thrones episode, which, why? I did, whatever. But I didn't watch any TV the whole time I was gone. And even just say, I'll do a month of no TV. You don't even need to leave your house.
Right.
That alone was just so powerful. And to realize, especially here, in the States, so many of us just numb out. We come home from work, we turn on the TV, and we just veg out to that. And maybe say, okay, instead of turning on the TV after work, find a great podcast to listen to, like
Right.
this one, or turn on some music and get out a sketchbook, or go take a walk, or just do something to switch up your routine. And if you're somebody who's thinking, I'm not that creative, or I can't draw, who's telling you what that has to look like?
Right.
Maybe for you, you know, drawing just looks like, I'm gonna make a couple lines on a piece of paper and draw a smiley face. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Getting rid of that expectation of this is what painting looks like, this is what ceramics looks like, this is what music has to be. How can you let go of those expectations and just do something for the sake of embracing the process?
Right.
Is really magical.
Absolutely it is.
And I don't know, I think it sparks something inside of you, and it gives you a way to just let go of a lot of things that you might be feeling on the inside,
Mm-hmm.
and get them out in the world. And who cares if no one sees it? I mean, I don't like to show my drawings to some people sometimes. No one has to see it. No one is making that a requirement. So finding that way to let go of all of those expectations, and it kind of goes back to yoga. How can you approach this without judgment?
Right.
Just do something to do it. Let go of good, bad outcome. Just try. See what happens. And if you don't like it, do something else.
Yeah. So, Monica, if you could sit back your high school graduating self, or even your senior, college graduating self, what would you tell her?
Find a therapist. Wish I'd started
I love
that a long
that.
time
Oh my
ago.
gosh.
I would have to say to really feel good in your own skin. I've spent a lot, and I don't want to speak for every person, but especially in today's culture, there's an ideal of beauty that so many of us feel like we just cannot live up to.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time feeling like shit about myself because of that. I used to have really bad skin. I have rosacea. Scandinavian people, you know what I'm talking about. And when I moved to the South, like, I literally had people tell me, you'd be so pretty if you just wore makeup. Or,
Ooh.
my favorite, what's wrong with your face? That really takes a toll on you.
Wow.
So one, finding therapy would have really helped me, but really learning to feel good in my own skin. Something that happened to me when I was in Italy, and it really made me realize that I need to work on my self-confidence. I was on a train, just in southern Italy. I was in Puglia, and I got on the train. I was kind of sweaty. I didn't have any makeup on. I had my hair pulled back. I had my glasses on, and there was an older gentleman sitting there, and then the rest of the train was like Italian Boy Scouts. I don't know what they're called in Italian. But it was just a train full of like preteen boys.
Right.
And so I was just sitting there, listening to some music, and the older guy reading the paper said something to me, and I kind of didn't understand him. I said, excuse me. And he said it again, and he said, tu sei bellissima. My first reaction...
And tell everyone what that means.
That means you're very beautiful. My first reaction was to look around and see who he was talking to, because I didn't think he could be talking about me. How shitty is that?
Yeah.
So getting to a point where I could feel good in my own skin a lot sooner, and the fact that I'm 36 and I'm just now realizing that.
How did you take that experience with that gentleman? Like, how did that change you? Like, what did you bring back from that?
I'm beautiful, and I deserve to feel beautiful, and so does everybody else. I have 2 young nieces, and thinking about them, not feeling good about who they are, as they are right in that moment, knowing that they don't have to be a certain height, they don't have to have a certain type of hairstyle, they don't have to be a certain weight or body shape. Everyone is beautiful in their own skin.
Mm-hmm.
And just because someone else doesn't see that in you, it doesn't mean it's not true. You need to feel it in yourself, and when you feel it and when you own it and you live it, it shines through and it shows.
How have you internalized that? Like, how have you been able to feel that for yourself?
It's really helped a lot in my yoga and meditation practice, and to be able to sit and feel really comfortable and feel really good. And honestly, I wake up every day, and it was actually a piece of graffiti too in Florence. Someone wrote on a, it was so random, I was walking, someone wrote it on a wall, and it was, "Sei la più bella," you are the most beautiful. I took a picture of that and I put it on my bathroom mirror.
Wow.
And I look at that every day, and I think some of it in our culture, and I, again, talked to my therapist about this,
Right.
the difference between self-confidence and ego. Because so many of us are told, you know, you need to be humble, tone it down, from a very young age.
Right.
Or if you're constantly told that you are beautiful from a young age, you start to feel like maybe people are just saying that because,
Right.
and you're not feeling it. So knowing that approaching it from a self-confidence standpoint means you own it and you believe it, but you see that in others.
Yes.
You don't think it puts you above anyone else.
Right. You're able to recognize what you're, that feeling.
So learning the difference in that too has been really valuable, and that kind of gave me some permission
Yes.
to feel that. But it's really liberating to wake up
Yeah.
every day and be like, hell yeah, I am the most beautiful.
Well, I think you're echoing something that May Novak, who was on the podcast a few weeks back, said that, you know, her why behind her brand, Yay brand, is that your worth is remembered, it is not earned.
Yes.
And I think you are speaking to that in such a deep and powerful way, is that we have to remember and embrace our worth. It's not about tooting your own horn. It's not about having a big ego. It's about respecting
Yes.
your own power, respecting
Mhm.
your own beauty, respecting your own self-worth.
Yeah, and that it takes a long time for some of us to feel that. It took a lot for me to feel that, and to give yourself permission that that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily ego driven. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest from a very working class family where you didn't necessarily show your achievements around to everybody. It was great that you achieved them, but it was from a place of, well, you don't want to make other people feel bad for showing what you accomplished.
Right.
So, you know, working to undo a lot of that and realize that I can feel good about myself at the same time that I also lift other people up.
Yes.
And I recognize the good, just because something great happens to someone else doesn't negate in any way the wonderful things that happen to me.
Right. And I would argue that honestly, by being able to walk in this way in the world, that you are lifting other people up. Because I think that, I mean, personally for me, when I see other women going after their dreams, and when I see other women living in a way that I want to live, it inspires me
Yeah, it
to
lights
want.
you up.
Yeah, it inspires me to do that too.
Yeah, and to do it, you have to find, and going back to what May said, find that reason, the why, as to you're doing it for yourself, and then how can you take that out and uplift others.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I'm working on. I teach sewing lessons, and if you don't know how to sew and you've been wondering about wanting to learn, it's so empowering, because in the apparel industry, we fit to what's called a core body. It's average, but it's kind of nobody. We have to fit, in mass market, we have to fit to a wide range of people.
Right.
But all of us have something that we're like, ooh, you know, anytime I go shop for pants, like the thighs are never big enough, or like the shoulders are always too narrow on things. That never comes into play. You always make things that are just for you from the beginning. And I really feel like using sewing as a tool to empower women to feel good about where they're at right now,
Yeah.
there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, absolutely there is. And if folks want to take your sewing lessons, how do they get in touch with you?
They can find me, probably the easiest way is to find me on Instagram. And
Can you share your handle? And
Yeah.
we'll link to it in the show notes as
yeah,
well.
so I'm MJB_makes. Drop me a line. If you're in the Piedmont Triad area, I will come to your house. If you don't have a machine, I'll bring a machine for you to use. But I'll come to your house, and I really tailor everything to what you want to work on and what you want to learn. You know, like one of my students we remade a coat that she had bought in Europe that was falling apart.
Whoa.
And she loved it. So we took it apart, made a pattern from it, found new fabric, and we're recutting it and remaking this coat, and it looks amazing on her.
Wow, that
Yeah.
is so cool.
It's really awesome, and it's really cool too to see someone learning a new skill and really start to see those things click.
Yes, yes.
But then also to see them say like, well, why can't I try this? And sometimes my students do things in a way that makes more sense than what I've been doing for years. Just because I have professional training, it doesn't mean their way of doing it is any less good.
Right.
You know, sometimes it's way better than what I'm doing.
I know, I can't wait to take lessons with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I have not picked up a sewing pattern since I was a wee little girl.
That's probably a good thing. That's probably a good thing. Yeah.
And tell me, Monica, how do you live a life of abundance?
I think for me, living a life of abundance, it just really goes back to gratitude and being able to recognize all of the good things that I have in my life. So much of it goes back to, for me, it's always the people, the connections that I have, my family, my wonderful friends, all the people I met on my trip, and taking the time out of your day to also let people know that they're important to you and let them know how much they mean to you, because tomorrow isn't promised. You don't know when that last time is that you'll get a chance to say that, or that they'll have a chance to say it to you. So let people know that they're important to you. And I mean, it feels great when someone reaches out to me and they're like, I was thinking about you. Let people know the same. We all have that, you know, it comes up. So just reach out to people and let them know. Take the time to let people know.
Thank you, Monica, so much for being on today's podcast.
Thank you. This is so wonderful.